Not much bigger than a fist, and weighing less than a pound, the human heart is a remarkable organ. It beats about 2.5 billion times during an average lifetime, pumping about 300 million liters of blood. To meet the body's changing needs, the heart can vary its output from 5 liters to more than 20 liters of blood per minute. Your heart is a hollow muscular organ located in the chest cavity, directly under the breastbone. Its wall consists mainly of cardiac muscle, attached to a framework of collagen fibers. The heart has a shape that looks like a cone. The base of that cone, on the upper side, is called the base of the heart, and the point of the cone is called the apex of the heart. As you can see, the heart is situated in a bit of a strange position inside the chest. The base is actually positioned at the top, and the apex is pointed down and to the left-hand side. So before we learn about the heart itself, we need to learn about what surrounds the heart. We've already touched upon this when learning about the different cavities of the human body. Let's start with the heart wall. The heart wall consists of 3 layers. The endocardium is the innermost layer of tissue that lines the chambers of the heart, as seen here. The myocardium is the middle layer of the heart wall, and it is the cardiac muscle. It comprises the majority of the heart wall, as seen here. And lastly, the epicardium is the outermost layer of tissue, which protects the heart from the outside. So those are the 3 layers of the heart wall: endocardium, myocardium, and epicardium. Covering or enclosing the heart, we see the pericardium, which is like a sac. The pericardium also has 3 layers. The visceral layer of serous pericardium is the innermost layer, and it is actually the epicardium of the heart. Kind of strange, but the outermost layer of the heart wall is also the innermost layer of the pericardium. Therefore it has 2 names. You can see this layer in the diagram here. Next we have the parietal layer of serous pericardium, shown here, and lastly, the fibrous pericardium, shown here. You may have noticed from the diagram that between the 2 layers of the serous pericardium is a small cavity, which we call the pericardial cavity. This cavity is filled with fluid, which reduces friction to a minimum as the heart beats. The coronary arteries are the arteries that supply blood to the heart. They wrap around the entire heart and transport oxygenated blood to the heart muscle. The heart, like any other organ or tissue in the body, requires a continuous supply of oxygen to function and survive. So finally, here is the internal structure of the heart, which you may already be vaguely familiar with from school. The heart has 4 chambers. The 2 superior chambers are the receiving chambers, and they are the atria or atriums, atrium in singular, and the 2 inferior pumping chambers are the ventricles. Why do we say that the atria are receiving chambers? Because they receive blood from blood vessels returning blood to the heart, called veins, while the ventricles pump the blood from the heart into blood vessels called arteries. Let's see these structures in the diagram to the right. Understanding and being able to recognize the different structures of the heart in diagrams is very important and can come up in entrance exams. The diagram we see here is a classic diagram of the heart from an anterior view, meaning a front view. However, we are looking at the inside of the heart, meaning we cut the heart in 2. So this is an anterior cross-section of the heart. We can see the cardiac muscle, which is all this light pink substance. And what I want you to be able to recognize, for now, is the 4 chambers of the heart. It's not always so easy to recognize them, but we have to generally be able to point out to where they are positioned. So let's start with the right atrium and ventricle. The right atrium is located here. That's the left side, you might say. But the reason we say that that is the right atrium is because whenever we are looking at an anatomical specimen, remember that we are looking at it as if a human being was standing in front of us. And therefore, that human's right side would be on our left, and his left side would be on our right. So up here, we see the right atrium. Below, we see the right ventricle. It's hard from this picture to clearly see the boundaries between the right atrium and the right ventricle. But if I were to guess, I would say that this is the ventricle. And we'll talk very soon about what separates the atrium from the ventricle. And what about the left atrium and the left ventricle? We similarly see the left atrium above the left ventricle. So here is the left atrium, and I would define this whole section here as the left ventricle. In addition, in the diagram, we can see many different arteries and veins going into the heart, and we'll discuss those in the next slide. A wall, or septum, separates the right atrium and ventricle from the left atrium and ventricle. In our diagram, this part right here would be the septum. Between the atria, the wall is known as the interatrial septum. Between the ventricles, it is known as the interventricular septum. From the diagram, it doesn't really look like there is a defined septum between the atriums, but trust us, there is. This is just what happens when you try to draw complicated 3D structures in 2 dimensions. It's important to understand that there is no direct connection between the left and right sides of the heart. We'll learn how blood passes through the heart in much detail in a few slides, but blood always flows from the left atrium to the left ventricle and out of the heart, and from the right atrium to the right ventricle and out of the heart. There is no passageway between the 2 sides. Something interesting to note is that the walls of the ventricles are much more muscular than the walls of the atriums. This is because blood is pushed out of the ventricles into the body. So it is the ventricles, and not the atriums, that need to be strong to be able to pump the blood into the body. Another interesting thing is that the walls of the left side of the heart are more muscular than the walls of the right side of the heart. This is because the left side of the heart supplies blood to the whole body, while the right side of the heart only supplies blood to the lungs. For now, we won't really explain how this works. We'll learn a lot about this in our next lesson, when we learn about pulmonary versus systemic circulation. But for now, just remember that the walls of the ventricles are stronger and more muscular than the walls of the atriums, and the walls of the left side of the heart are more muscular than the walls of the right side of the heart. Lastly, there is one last term regarding anatomy of the heart that may come up in entrance exams, and that is the auricles of the heart. On the anterior surface of each atrium is a wrinkled pouch-like structure called an auricle. Auricle means resembling an ear or earlobe, so I guess someone thought it looked like an ear. You can see the 2 auricles of each atrium in the picture to the right, as well as the location of the ventricles and the atriums. Note that we can't see the left atrium because it is hidden behind what we can see in the diagram. We know that it is difficult to visualize all these complex 3D structures. That's why in med school, you will be given access to advanced anatomical models, or even better, human cadavers. There is nothing more helpful for understanding anatomy than being able to see the actual human body. For now, do your best. We've chosen the best pictures we could find to try and help you visualize the 3D structure of the heart. So now that we understand the different chambers of the heart, we need to understand the blood vessels that enter and exit those chambers. The first vessel we will talk about is the aorta, which is the thickest blood vessel in the whole body. Its diameter is more than 2 centimeters. Yeah, it's really massive, and for a good reason. It is the main artery that carries oxygenated blood, meaning blood rich with oxygen, away from the heart to the rest of the body. It exits from the left ventricle. It is always very easy to recognize in pictures, because it forms an arch. Next we have the pulmonary artery. It carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs. What do we mean by deoxygenated blood? This is blood that doesn't have a high concentration of oxygen, meaning this is blood that has finished circulating through the whole body, unloading its oxygen, and is now heading back to the lungs to be reoxygenated. Instead of oxygen, the deoxygenated blood carries a lot of carbon dioxide with it to be exhaled from the body. In a diagram, you can always find it to the right of the aorta. Another very large blood vessel entering the heart is the superior vena cava, which is the largest vein in the body. It returns deoxygenated blood from the upper body to the right atrium of the heart. Its brother is the inferior vena cava, which returns deoxygenated blood from the lower body, also to the right atrium of the heart. Both the inferior and the superior vena cava are drawn as large vertical vessels to the left of the aorta. Here is the superior vena cava, and here is the inferior vena cava. And lastly, we have the pulmonary veins, which return oxygenated blood from the lungs into the left atrium of the heart. The pulmonary veins are harder to find in diagrams. They are usually drawn horizontally, as two small vessels. Here we can see two of them on the right side, but we can't see any on the left side. We will learn more about these pathways in our next lesson, when we learn about the two circulatory systems in our body, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. But for now, I do want you to memorize which artery or vein enters which chamber of the heart, and be able to recognize them from a diagram. A lot of people find the locations of the arteries and veins that enter and exit the heart a bit confusing. Not only are there quite a few of them, but they all seem to come from the top of the heart. It would make more sense that the veins that enter the heart, specifically they enter the atriums, would enter from the top, but the arteries that exit the ventricles, which are below the atriums, would exit from the bottom of the heart. However, even the arteries exit from the top of the heart. And remember that the top of the heart is called the base of the heart. A bit confusing, but let's look at the following schematic diagram and see if we can make more sense out of everything. Let's look first at the diagram on the left and point out the different vessels which we have just described. From the top, we can see the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, which enter the right atrium. The blood then flows from the right atrium to the right ventricle, and from there, exits the heart through the pulmonary artery. This whole part of the system carries deoxygenated blood, meaning blood that is low in oxygen. On the right, we have pulmonary veins entering the left atrium. Then the blood flows into the left ventricle, and from there into the aorta. This part of the system carries oxygenated blood, meaning blood that is high in oxygen. Next, we'll talk about the heart valves. Valves are like special doors that close automatically and prevent blood from flowing backwards. What do we mean by backwards? Well, in a minute we'll see that blood flows in a one-directional cycle around the body, and it is important that blood flows only in that one direction. Valves help maintain this unidirectional flow. We have two types of valves in the heart. Atrioventricular valves, or AV valves, are found between the atriums and the ventricles. The tricuspid valve is the valve found between the right atrium and right ventricle, and the mitral valve is the valve found between the left atrium and left ventricle. Note that the mitral valve is also called the bicuspid valve, since it only has two parts, or cusps, while all other valves have three. The second type of valves found in the heart are semilunar valves, which guard the exits from the heart. The aortic valve is found between the left ventricle and the aorta, which I'll remind you, is the large artery that exits from the left ventricle to supply blood to the whole body. And the pulmonary valve is found between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, which is the artery that exits from the right ventricle to the lungs. So now that we understand the basic anatomy of the heart, it's finally time to understand how the heart works. To do this, we will define the term cardiac cycle. Each minute, the heart beats about 70 times. This means that one complete heartbeat takes about 0.8 seconds and is referred to as a cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle consists of alternating periods of contraction and relaxation of the heart. Systole is the term we use to define the portion of the cycle in which contraction occurs. Diastole is the term we use to define the portion of the cycle in which relaxation of the heart occurs. When you listen to the heartbeat with a stethoscope, that thing that doctors carry around their neck all the time, you can hear two main heart sounds, lub-dub, which repeat rhythmically. These sounds result from the heart valves closing. Let us listen to them together for a few seconds. You can hear two quick pulses and then a pause. The two quick pulses are the lub-dub. I am not really sure why they are called lub-dub, but it is a common name to describe them. The lub sound, the first beat, is caused by the closing of the AV valves and marks the beginning of ventricular systole, meaning the contraction of the ventricles. The dub sound, immediately next, marks the closing of the semilunar valves and the beginning of ventricular diastole, meaning the relaxation of the ventricles. Let's now go into more detail and describe the whole cardiac cycle. Since it is a cycle, it is a bit difficult to decide from where to start describing the cycle. We will arbitrarily start describing it from the point depicted here at the top. At this point, the AV valves are open, the semilunar valves are closed, and blood flows into the heart. But how exactly is the blood flowing into the heart? From the lungs, the blood arrives and enters the left atrium through the pulmonary veins and flows down into the left ventricle. From the body, the blood flows into the right atrium from the superior and inferior vena cava and flows down into the right ventricle. The next step in the cardiac cycle is atrial systole, shown here as number 1. In atrial systole, both atria contract, pushing blood through the open tricuspid and mitral valves into the ventricles. At this stage, the semilunar valves are closed, so this means that when blood rushes into the ventricles, it accumulates there. It cannot pass onto the blood vessels leading out of the ventricles. The next step in the cardiac cycle is the beginning of the ventricular systole, number 2 in the diagram. When the ventricles start contracting, the pressure within the ventricles increases, and this closes the tricuspid and the mitral valves. This creates the first sound we hear, the lub sound. Next we have a time period of rising pressure, shown as number 3. The more the ventricles contract, the more the pressure inside the ventricle increases. And eventually the pressure in the ventricles exceeds the pressure in the arteries that leave the heart. This pushes the semilunar valves open, and blood spurts into the aorta from the left ventricle, and into the pulmonary artery from the right ventricle. The next step, number 4, is the beginning of ventricular diastole. The ventricles start relaxing, and the pressure inside them drops, below the pressure in the arteries. This causes the semilunar valves to snap shut, which creates the second heart sound, termed the dub. Remember, lub-dub. And lastly, we get back to where we started. The pressure in the heart drops, and blood begins to flow back into the heart and fill up the atriums. Remember, this is not blood that is flowing backwards, because the semilunar valves are shut. This is blood that has completed its cycle around the body or the lungs, and is ready to be pumped back again into the body. And that completes one full cardiac cycle. We have described the cardiac cycle, where many components and muscles all work in synchronization to make things work 70 times a minute. What makes all these muscles work in such beautiful synchronization and at a well-controlled pace? The answer is on the screen: the pacemakers of the heart. Most of you have probably seen some type of medical TV series where a patient comes in with some sort of cardiac arrest and gets shocked back to life with paddles by doctors. But why in the world are they shocking the heart? I mean, in a way that doesn't sound so productive. Well, the reason that shocking the heart sometimes can actually help, and by the way, oftentimes it doesn't, is that the heart actually uses electricity to coordinate the contraction of all its muscle fibers. Cardiac muscle fibers and cells are joined at their ends by a specialized electrical conduction system, which ensures that the heart beats in a regular and effective rhythm. They contract when given an electrical command to do so. And there is a whole system in place to give these commands. Contractions of cardiac muscle begin within the heart muscle itself, independently of any nerve supply. This may sound obvious to some, but in a way, it actually isn't. Almost nothing in our body happens independently of our brain. Almost everything that happens in our body happens because the brain has decided to send signals that make it happen. Sometimes, the decision to make those things happen is conscious, and sometimes it isn't, but it always passes through the brain. Even breathing, for example, is something that is regulated and controlled by the brain. However, the heart beats on its own. It doesn't need the brain in order to beat. It has its own control mechanism, its own pacemakers, which replace the brain. The pacemakers initiate a heartbeat by themselves, with no brain intervention, every second or so. And this is also, by the way, why you can take a heart out of a body, and it will continue to pump in your hand. Quite strange, I know. So anyway, how does the system work? Each heartbeat is initiated by the pacemaker, a small mass of specialized cardiac muscle fibers, in the sinoatrial node, or SA node for short. The SA node is located in the posterior wall of the right atrium, near the opening of the superior vena cava. You can see the SA node here in the diagram. Next, the electrical current travels to the atrioventricular node, AV node for short, which is located in the right atrium, along the lower part of the septum. Here it is in the diagram, a bit below the SA node. Once the signal arrives at the AV node, it is delayed briefly, so that the atria can finish contracting, before the ventricles begin to contract. From the AV node, the electrical current spreads into specialized muscle fibers that make up the bundle of His. From there, the current travels to the bundle branches. The two long fibers, which you can see here, are termed the left and right bundle branch, accordingly. These bundles eventually form the small Purkinje fibers, which you can see here. In general, the direction of electrical flow through the heart is from the atriums to the ventricles. And this makes sense, since the atriums contract first, and then the ventricles. By placing electrodes on the body surface, on opposite sides of the heart, physicians can amplify and record the electrical activity of the heart. This can be an extremely important diagnostic tool for a variety of different heart problems. The graph produced by the electrodes is called an electrocardiogram, EKG, or ECG in short. On the right, you can see some heartbeats recorded on an electrocardiogram. Below, you can see one isolated heartbeat, and the way the different electrical pulses through the heart are received through the ECG electrodes. The diagram associates each part of the cardiac cycle with a specific part in the corresponding ECG cycle. Understanding why the electrocardiogram looks specifically the way it looks, why there are these 3 bumps, and why they look the way they do, is actually very complicated. It has to do with advanced physics and math, which we do not cover in this course. However, you still may be asked some questions about cardiograms. So what do you need to know? One of the things, which we will not teach you in this course, is action potentials of heart muscles. Action potentials occur when the membrane potential of a specific cell location rapidly rises and falls. Okay, this was quite a complicated sentence. What is a potential? Why do membranes have it? And why on earth does it rise and fall? Don't worry. Like I said, we won't be learning about action potentials of heart cells. We will be learning about action potentials of brain cells later on in this course, but all in due time. Then why am I talking about action potentials anyway? Action potentials have a depolarizing and a polarizing phase. In terms of heart muscles, the depolarizing phase means the contracting phase of the heart muscle, and the polarizing phase means the relaxation phase of the heart muscle. In the ECG, we can classify 3 parts, which you need to be able to recognize, and know which type of polarization or depolarization is happening in the heart, and where it happens. You don't have to understand why this happens, or how this happens, but just the 3 very simple things, which I will show you now. This first part, right here in the ECG, is called the P wave. It happens because of atrial depolarization, or atrial contraction. This second part here is called the QRS complex, and it happens because of ventricular depolarization, or ventricular contraction. Now so far this makes sense. The atria, we know, contract right before the ventricles. Then this last third part is called the T wave, and it happens because of ventricular repolarization, meaning polarizing again, which is the relaxation phase of the ventricles. Like I promised, simple. You just need to know the phases, their names, and what they represent, in terms of the cardiac cycle. In the previous section, I've stated that the heart regulates itself. It doesn't need the brain to tell it to contract. It has its own pacemakers. However, although the heart can beat independently, the heart rate is in fact carefully regulated by the nervous and endocrine systems in order to meet different needs of the body. Obviously, when we run uphill, the body needs the heart to beat faster and stronger than when we are at rest. But the heart itself has no way of knowing what are the actual needs of the body. It must be told. Sensory receptors in the walls of certain blood vessels and chambers of the heart are sensitive to changes in blood pressure. When stimulated, the receptors send messages to cardiac centers in the medulla of the brain. The medulla is found in the lower part of the brain, in your upper neck area. These cardiac centers govern 2 sets of autonomic nerves that pass to the SA node. Now, we do not yet know what autonomic nerves are, but you may be vaguely familiar with the idea that a large part of the nervous system acts essentially unconsciously and regulates many of our bodily functions, such as digestion, respiratory rate, urination, and heart rate, for example. This system, which we will obviously learn more about when we learn about the nervous system, has 2 parts, a parasympathetic division and a sympathetic division. In terms of regulating heart rate, the parasympathetic nerves release the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which slows down the heart when needed. On the other hand, sympathetic nerves release the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, which speeds the heart rate and increases the strength of contraction. Another regulator of heart rate is the endocrine system. In response to physical and emotional stressors, the adrenal glands release epinephrine and norepinephrine, which speed up the heart. So this brings us to the last part of this lesson, which as usual, will be diseases and disorders. We begin with a disorder called arrhythmia, which is a group of abnormal heart rhythms. What does abnormal mean? We identify several types of out-of-the-norm conditions. The first one is too fast heart rate. If the heart of an adult beats over 100 times a minute in full rest, this is above normal, a condition called tachycardia. On the other hand, if the heart beats too slow at full rest, below 60 beats a minute, this is called bradycardia. Not everyone with a resting heart rate below 60 is considered ill. Active athletes often have lower resting heart rate, and they are just fine. For other people, this can be a serious condition, since not enough blood is being pumped to the body tissues. Next we have atrial fibrillation, which occurs when the atria of the heart beat in an erratic and irregular manner, out of sync with the ventricles. For some people, atrial fibrillation comes with no special symptoms, but often it causes a fast and pounding heartbeat, and can be accompanied by shortness of breath or weakness. A much more serious condition is ventricular fibrillation, in which the ventricles contract in a very rapid and uncoordinated manner. As a result, the heart doesn't pump blood to the rest of the body. This is a life-threatening emergency that requires immediate medical attention. Ventricular fibrillation is the most common cause of sudden cardiac death. Congenital heart disease is a defect in the structure of the heart or the large vessels that is present at birth. There are quite a few types of such defects, which may involve the interior walls of the heart valves, or the large blood vessels that lead to and from the heart. The symptoms depend on the specific type of defect, and vary greatly, from no symptoms at all, to life-threatening symptoms. The reasons for such defects are usually not clear. Genetics may play a role in some cases. In other cases, exposure of the fetus during pregnancy to viral infections, drugs, or alcohol may be the reason for congenital heart disease. One of these conditions is called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and newborns that suffer from it are born with a critically underdeveloped left side of the heart. This obviously leads to devastating consequences, since the left side of the heart is the side that pumps blood to the body. Amazingly, through 3 surgeries, the first one done during the first 2 weeks of the newborn's life, and the last one between 18 months and 4 years of age, doctors can reroute the heart. They can reconnect the vessels of the heart so that the right side of the heart, which is well developed, will pump blood to the body. We've learned that even a developed right side of the heart is not as strong as a fully developed left side of the heart, but this is still much better than the underdeveloped left side of the heart, which these children have. These surgeries are often successful, and many of these children survive, and can evade heart transplants, which are obviously not an ideal solution. Absolutely amazing. Heart failure, also known as congestive heart failure, occurs when the heart muscle doesn't pump blood as well as it should. Several conditions are known that render the heart muscle incapable of doing its task properly. One such condition is when it does not get enough blood because of narrowed arteries that feed it with blood, a condition known as coronary artery disease. Another problem may be high blood pressure, which makes it too hard for the heart to pump blood against such high pressure. Any of these conditions weakens the heart muscle or makes it too stiff, so it cannot contract efficiently and pump enough blood. The last disease of the heart we will discuss is commonly known as a heart attack. The formal medical name is myocardial infarction. This occurs when the flow of blood to the heart muscles is blocked. The heart muscles are fed with blood through several arteries, known as the coronary arteries. You can see them on the diagram around the heart. They are sometimes blocked because of buildup of fat, cholesterol, and other substances, which form a plaque in the arteries. You can see that on the diagram as the artery gradually becomes clogged. How can doctors deal with these clogs? This depends on how badly the arteries are clogged. If the arteries are only partially blocked, doctors can use something called a stent. A stent is a tiny wire mesh tube that is inserted into a narrowed or partially blocked coronary artery. The stent is inserted into the clogged artery with a balloon catheter. The balloon is inflated, reopening the vessel, and the stent expands and locks in place. This holds the artery open to allow blood to flow freely. In other cases, when the artery is completely blocked, inserting the balloon catheter is not possible. In such cases, a bypass surgery is necessary. In such surgery, doctors take a section of artery from another area in the body, typically from the leg, and connect it instead of the clogged section in the coronary artery. They bypass the blocked section, hence the surgery name. So that's it for the second part of our 3-part mini-series about the cardiovascular system. On the next and final part, we will discuss blood vessels and how the blood is circulated in the body.